Hello and welcome, folks. It's the Coach and the Commentator. This is episode 2. So I guess we made it this long. Decent turnout for episode 1. Hopefully we can continue to grow this. I am ESPN college basketball analyst Jon Crispin. He is brother Joe, head coach of Rowan University men's basketball. This is the Coach and the Commentator. I'm the commentator side of this. Joe is the coach. And hopefully the idea of this is to bring a little balance, right? There's a balance to the conversation. It's not just a bunch of analysts talking about stuff that we don't actually do. I think there is a little balance to this conversation, and it's good to have balance if we're going to get into what we're going to get into today. The conversation today is about officiating, and usually there's like a little lead up or something. There's no lead up to this, man. We're just going to get into it because I think we need time. Everybody complains about officiating. They think the game is poorly officiated, especially in the Big Ten. Big Ten officials get killed. They get crushed to the point where, good officials just retire. It's almost like coaches leaving because of NIL, right? It's just like, I don't need to deal with this. Like, I don't need to deal with angry tweets and letters to my home and people knocking on my doors. Like, it ain't worth it in the end. But there's a lot more to it. It's not just about poor officiating. There's a lot more to it. So, Joe, like, before we get into this, because the conversation for us is going to steer towards rules, where it's less about the guys wearing black and white, but it's more about the rules. What would you say about officiating? Because you coach at a level, the D3 level, where maybe you should talk too much, but it's not great. I've been to some of your games. It's not great, and it's also inconsistent with a lot of what you see at the higher levels. So from your perspective, where do the issues lie in officiating on your level?
Well, I think we should just take a step back first.
Go ahead and be careful with this response.
Well, I think there's a lot of issues when it comes to officials, some of which are totally not the official's fault, which is what we're going to get into today. I think the bigger thing that is important to point out in all our conversations is even when commentators, get gabby and just are talking for talking points, the bad is for commentators to just talk to gain attention. But the good is to talk to try to make things better, to steer conversation, to make the game better. And I think when you start talking about officials or you start talking about rules, which is where I think we'll end up, it's just important to note from the beginning that the game of basketball, as incredibly quickly as it has evolved, it's not a finished product yet. It's not as good as we want it to be. We're always learning and making improvements to make the game better. That's just a normal part of the game, right? This has always been happening, right? Since it was like 10-on-10 at the Springfield gym with the Peach Band, and they realized, oh, this might be too many people. Let's go 7-on-7. This is a little, and then somehow they settled on 5-on-5, and then somehow they settled on 94 feet. Well, that took 40 years.
Before and then a 3-point line.
Yeah, and that took another 40 years. Oh, we should have this 3-point line. And
shot clock.
So all these things is like the game is not a finished product. And so for someone to say right up front, the game should be better, that we all agree on that, right? Yeah. And I think the question then becomes how we should make it better or what adjustments we should make. And, I think you get this. I'm not on social media. Maybe someday, maybe not.
Don't do it.
That you get a lot of people just complaining about officials, or you get coaches complaining about officials, of which I am guilty like anyone else. But when you take a step back and really evaluate maybe why things are the way they are, I think a lot of times the answers we're giving to the problems that we see are completely wrong because they're looking in the wrong direction, right? They're looking at the wrong...
we're too close to the surface with a lot of these issues.
Yeah, too close to the surface, not getting beneath things here, not seeing, the game from a kind of 30,000 feet. Yeah. So I think that's where when people talk about officials, like what if I step back and said, I don't think these things are the official's fault at all, particularly the most glaring issues that I see at the highest level of basketball, because those issues aren't the same at our level, frankly, even though it's the same rules more or less, and we can get into that.
Well, and even if your son Elijah first came back yesterday from a knee injury, and the rules, the way they're applied at the high school level, completely different.
Well, that game was a whole
Completely
other story.
different.
That
I
was
mean, so
he
what
had
people
he had
what
3
people should
fouls and none
know.
of them were fouls. Like
So
this was a low level, entry level back game after knee injury. But
you're
you're
hearing
right.
some of the crazy dad and Joe come out there. Crazy dad,
Well, no, I wasn't crazy. I was just thankful he was healthy
stage
by the end
dad.
of it and he was able to help him win. But the
He
the
did hit a
thing
game winner, so we should mention that.
yeah,
So
he did.
tie score. He dribbles around four guys and hits a step back three to win the game. So that was
That
cool.
was a good way to come back.
Yeah.
So I think
Wait,
but
do you have the video? Like
we do have
we're
the
on a
video.
show now. We're on a show now that I could actually put the video in. I could pay it off. We
Yeah.
have these capabilities now, and we're not taking advantage of it. But no, before we get too far on that line, I do want to bring up there are so many times, and part of having this conversation and what makes it funny is the fact that there are so many times that you're sitting, whether you're in your four-season room there in the back, and I can look out the back window and see you're watching games and know that I'm inevitably going to get a text message with some silly call or something dumb that someone's not doing. We share this stuff all the time. Like you'll say, how is this not a foul? Or this is not an illegal screen.
Why
Or this is ridiculous.
This a foul? This is
Why is
I
this a
take
foul?
video.
Yep.
I take a video of it and just say, like the other night, I sent you the video of a moving screen call that was not a moving screen at all. That
Illinois game.
It was a great fade screen in an Illinois game for a wide open three. The kid hits
screen
the three,
the backside, Steph Curry style. Yep, it was awesome.
Like the NBA, it's a moving screen every time because they want more offense, right? That's why they don't call travels and they don't call moving screens. Well, okay, I don't like that either. They go a little extreme on the travels, but this was a great fade screen, perfectly executed. Slow motion shows it. You take away 3 points off the board. Well, why? Because moving screens are an emphasis. So everyone's on hyper alert for these emphasis, and then you don't realize you're missing the big picture. But I think when you step back, and I just think we should just hop right into the conversation. It's like what people don't realize is that when, at least from my perspective, every year I get the videos and, Jim Haney does a good job. These guys do a good job trying to improve officials, but these are former officials who understand the difficulties that they're facing and can't change the things that actually matter, right?
True.
So the focus becomes on officials when in reality, and this is what I liken it to, right, is we grew up and I in the NCAA tournament in 1990, 91, whatever it was, 92, staying up 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock on mom and dad's bedroom floor watching Loyola Marymount. I stayed up for that, right? I don't even know if I was supposed to. What was I, like 12 years old? Like, I'm staying up for that. I don't even know if I was supposed to be awake. I watched that whole game, right?
Yep.
And why? Because it was a show. Now, when you used to watch, I remember the Bo Kimball shot from half court at St. Joe's, right? I remember those games because they were so awesome to watch. The Arkansas back in the day, the Oklahoma back in the day. And this is what people are like, oh, why don't we have more of that? We want more of that. We want more scoring. Oh, you know what the interesting thing back then was? 2 TV timeouts. Under 15 and under 5, or under 14 and under 7, something like that. And if you didn't call it, it wasn't happening. So like somebody had to call it. It was something like that. And it's like you go back and you're sitting there. No one seems to make this connection between the changing of 4 TV timeouts and then replays and everything else. The amount of stoppages there's an accidental elbow. That's going to take 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
The timeouts are so long. Nobody makes the connection between these radical changes for the sake of television and the reduced scoring we see in the game. And anyone
nobody wants to make the correlation. That's the thing. Nobody wants to make the correlation because it's an uphill battle. You can't win, right? You're talking about the finances of the game. You're talking about some of the biggest decision makers in all of college sports are deciding on these things. And these are things that they're not willing to sacrifice. You're talking about money. Now, I agree there's a different way to make them.
Yeah, there's a different. Let's be creative.
But that's the thing. You're asking. That's what I'm saying. You're asking people to think differently, and that's what we stink at. We stink at anything that is different from what we're comfortable with, and that's why coaches don't want to see too many changes to the game because they like the way the game's played. That's how they can thrive. That's how they know they can put a winner on the floor, especially in the Big Ten. Like the Big Ten's one of the worst at almost assimilating to the conference and the way it's called in the conference and played in the conference just to be able to survive the conference. I just dropped off bagels like 25 minutes ago to your house, and we talked about this, where it's like that's one of the biggest issues is to survive in the Big Ten, you have to assimilate to the way the game's played. And the way the game's played, in so many ways, hurts them. Hurts Big Ten teams when you get to the NCAA tournament.
People have heard this from us before, if they've listened to anything else that we did, or if they just know us at all. Like the Big Ten has one national champion in the last 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Or over 30 years. Was it 89 with Ramil Robinson and Rice, or was that early? I think it was 89. So
89, yeah.
It's over 30 years old. And that team with Michigan, I think you look it up, they averaged over 90 points a game, I believe. They were an incredible offensive team. And Michigan State was an amazing defensive team in 2000, and we knew that team very well. That was a pretty physical time of play. It was also the period
Big Ten make men.
It was also the period that they always said that, but it was also the period where TV timeouts had been introduced per whatever. And when I used to, was pretty relentless when I would come out of the game and go, I don't need a sub ever. I have 4 timeouts. I got 6 timeouts a half.
You're right.
I wasn't wrong, right? I wasn't wrong. I'm like, why do I need a sub? There's timeouts everywhere. And when my players, which we usually don't play with TV timeouts, and I almost never call them because I don't want the clock to stop. When we play with TV timeouts, the guys are like, Coach, I'm good. And they're not wrong. But the point being in the Big Ten is the Big Ten conference, I think, is widely accepted as the most physical of conferences. Often slow pace of play. The argument being, the way you're playing your 20 regular season games is hurting you in the postseason. So the way to win the Big Ten is probably, empirically, not the way to win a national title.
Yeah.
If it was, I would think we'd have 1, 2 more, right? We're Big Ten guys. We're rooting for Big Ten teams. I would think that, right? We've had some Final Four teams, but how many of those Final Four teams actually legitimately were going to win the title, right?
You had Ohio State in their day. Greg Oden.
There was a couple. There was
Connolly, and then Michigan with Mo Wagner. I thought that was a team that could have won it. They beat Loyola Chicago.
We were there
first round, and then lost to Kansas.
That's right. Note about those teams: they were great offensive teams, every single one.
And frankly, Joe,
when they lost to Duke, great.
Yes, but go back to Michigan with Trey Burke. Right, that's a team that should have won a national championship. And had we had freedom of movement with this point of emphasis, freedom of movement, there's no way in anything that Louisville wins by fouling every single time down floor.
Yes,
I mean that was a full-on hack fest. That was a hack fest. But hey, I want hang on before we get too far into this. I did get the video you sent, so let's see if I can pop it up. This is kind of we're already off. We're already off the rails, but like if you can't show your son some love, then I don't know what you could do. Yeah, here we go.
Fast forward.
Not a lot of athletes on the floor, Joe.
This is also when the shot clock is needed, because they held for the last shot for like a minute and 20. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there it is. Bang. Let's go back. Let's go back. Joe likes to do this with me. So Elijah's number 3 here. He throws the ball in bounds. He gets it back. All sorts of poor defense. Little ball handling. Step back. Bang.
Well, it reminds me of the old that was a box and one. It reminds me of the old we had a play called 53 or something, or 54. We didn't run a lot of plays in high school, but if a team went box and one, I remember this play because it was you standing in the corner and the 3 other guys setting the ball screen. It was a triple ball screen. And I would go off left and shoot that exact shot. So I was laughing last night when that happened. I'm like, whoa, they didn't mean to do that per se. But it was literally all 3 guys would line up and set a ball screen, and you would be in the opposite corner because they guarded you. Yeah, and I would just come off and shoot every time. That's
unless we were playing Uncle Grant's team. My Uncle Grant, who coached at Williamstown High School, he's actually the athletic director at Pittman right now, where Elijah is, where our father is the superintendent. So things really coming full circle here. But Uncle Grant was the head coach at Williamstown, and I think he ran a boxing one on you, but let me go my freshman year. Like where it was kind of like he let me be a part of the box. And I thought I had a good game. This was great. Like I thought I had a good game because you had 17 and I had 18. And I was like, well, I don't know. I did all right. And Dad was quick to be like, are you serious? Do you remember that one?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He gave you a talking to. He gave you like, no.
So I was like, I was feeling good. I led the team in scoring.
Freshman year.
Nobody covered me.
Freshman year. Ashton, our senior, did have a career high that day, and they lost by 30 for boxing wanting me. So it wasn't the best strategy. But so let's go back. Let's go back. So let's go back to
how do you want to set this? How do you want to set this conversation? Because like setting the table for the conversation is important. I think you did a good job by saying like it's less about the individual officials. It's more about the rules. You want to get into the rules. What I do want to mention, though, first, before we get into some of these things that do hurt the game, because we talk a lot about flow, rhythm and flow. Right? You got to find a flow in the game. The problem is there is no flow in the game. There's no, as a broadcaster, one of the things I try to do is spend the first 5 minutes of the game feeling the game. If you, I don't talk as much, and anybody who listens, they could attest to this. I talk a lot more later. The first few minutes, I want to find the rhythm of the game. Every game has a certain rhythm, and there's a little up and down to it. Even the physicality has a rhythm to the physicality. There's a consistency, if not even a consistent inconsistency. You can feel it if you can find it. And what's getting harder and harder is it's harder and harder to identify any sort of rhythm in college basketball right now. People find it at times, but it's almost as if they find it by accident, right? You get up and down, and it's like a couple misses in a row, and the ball's getting up and down the floor, and you're like, okay, we're starting to find it.
And then boom, timeout,
yes. Right? But the other part of this, before we get to that, because the other part of this is there's a big brother element to officiating that I don't think people understand. If you've done your job for 20 plus years and you've worked your way up to the level you're at, the last thing you want is a middle manager telling you what to do and how to do it midway through a game, let alone after a game, but getting a grade on calling exactly everything that they're telling you to call. And these are people that aren't officials. These are people that maybe didn't even play the game, maybe didn't even coach the game. It's this bureaucratic system where it's as if you have to call X, Y, and Z or you don't get NCAA tournament games. So you incentivize these guys to call the game in a way that makes the game stink. And I think that to me is one of the most frustrating things, because the conversations I have with officials are often, I just wish I could call it based on how I see it. And what they're really saying is what they see is also what they feel. Officials, good officials, NBA officials, they get involved in the game from a feel standpoint where they clean it up early, they establish how the game's going to be called, and they adjust with the game. And college officials aren't able to do that, even though these guys have done this forever. And they should be given more power. It's hard to do your job when you know you're going to get graded on things that you thought, hey, look, I made a judgment call by letting that go, and now I'm getting docked. Like, so now I have to call that. That is a part of this dumb system. So that's there. But I know you want to get into some of the rules, because you're right. The rules of college basketball really slow the game down.
Well, and this is where I just think it's important to note, right? My biggest conviction is that because, and I believe this, number one, because I've literally played basketball all over the world, right? I've played in 40-minute games with 24-second shot clocks to 150. I've played in physical games with TV timeouts in the Big Ten. I've played overseas where only the coaches couldn't call timeout at the table with no TV timeouts, right? With 10-minute quarters.
You're going to have to explain that one, by the way, because that's part of this.
Yep. With 5 fouls, with all this other stuff, with, under FIBA rules, etc. So I've played a game in all these variety of situations, and I've found flow at the professional level. And I found playing at the professional level easier than the college level. We got used to it, but we didn't realize how disruptive it was. Now I coach at a level where typically we don't play with any TV timeouts. Sometimes we do. It's a choice of a school. Some schools go 14-7. Some schools at times to prepare for the NCAA tournament, which makes no sense to me at all because there's not that much media there. It's not like we need commercial TV timeouts. We play 16, 12, 8, and 4, and I hate it. Absolutely. I mean, we are a rhythm, feel, flow-based team, averaging a lot of points a game, having fun. Let's get going. Let's get tired. I'll sub you out. Let's go. I don't like it. I don't like it for my team. I don't like it for the game itself. Right.
Yeah.
And my conviction is that we spend way too much time focusing on officials and what they call or don't call and these nitty-gritty details because we're trying to put a Band-Aid on something that needs more than a Band-Aid, right? I don't think it needs surgery, but I think it needs adjustments, right? And I think the biggest things that we come back to, right, having played professionally overseas is, the TV timeouts, right? The actual literal structure of the game, which could include 4 quarters and TV timeouts, right? The amount of TV timeouts is absurd. The amount of timeouts we see in a basketball game is literally ridiculous, right? Because even though coaches typically save their timeouts for the end of the game, they don't even need them because something's going to replay in the last 2 minutes. Something's going to replay, and you don't even need to use a timeout.
Do you understand that everybody sits on their timeouts knowing that, right?
Yeah,
you're
don't
going to
even
get
use
free timeouts. You're going to use them if you absolutely need them in the last minute of the game. But the last minute of every game is taking. If it's a 5-point game, the last minute of the game is going to take 20 minutes. Like it's just
also,
how it goes.
So like in
but
the NBA,
Joe, we sit in studio though. We sit in studio and we're sitting there going, all right, we're going to have a 15-minute fill, right? So because the game seems to be running quickly because no one's taking their timeouts, we think we're going to have a 15-minute fill. So our producers put together 15 minutes of content to fill until the next game. The last 2 minutes of the game took up all 15 minutes.
Yes.
It happens all the time. And it's like, we call them fill kills. We call them the fill killer. So it's like, oh, here's the fill killer foul, fill killer review, fill killer flop. Like it happens so often in late game situations that the last couple minutes of the game is not even basketball anymore.
Well, and again, I don't blame the officials for they need to get those calls right. Like there's people's jobs are on the line sometimes with these NCAA tournament appearances. But
they also blow the whistle and then immediately do this, knowing that they have the crutch.
The players do it. The coaches will do it just to get a timeout. I would.
Yes,
right? I would just go, whoa, we got to review it.
Hubert Davis the other night with the flagrant foul that they got called. He's sitting there calling for the review, and he's sitting there going, all right, call for the review, even if we don't get it.
I got a timeout. Yeah, I would do it too. And Hubert's an honest guy. He knows what he's doing. He's a competitor. But go back to just the sheer structure of the game. And the structure of the game that I come back to, the most important thing to me is probably 3 or 4 points, I'd say, is one, the structure of quarters versus halves, the structure of TV timeouts, right? Where you put them and how many you have, and even how long they last. The third one actually is personal foul rules, of which I have an idea.
Yes.
Actually, that would be the fourth one. But the other one and the big one is the shot clock.
Yep.
And whether you should play with a 24 or 30-second shot clock. And I think that, eventually we're going to play with a 24-second shot clock, just like the rest of the world does.
Okay, we'll start there. Start there, because we had talked about this when we did the show for ESPN Radio State College, where we got into this conversation, and maybe the conversation's evolved a little bit, but I think it's going to be pretty consistent with what we had then. You had mentioned you're 12 years old. You're going to start playing club basketball over in Europe. You're 12 years old and you play with a 24-second shot clock, and
against man-to-man,
but also, and we're always shocked by the skill of their big men. Right? We're always shocked. Oh, wow. European bigs, they know how to shoot. They know how to play. Great skill, good feel for the game. Well, why would you say that is?
Well, it's all the shot clock. And it's the shot clock. And now we're doing this. We can include a list to my playlist that's like 75 minutes long on why we need a shot clock. I just mentioned Elijah's game last night. They held the ball for the last minute and a half of the game.
Yeah. Because it was tied.
And they should. The other team let them, and they should. But with a shot clock, they would have had to manage the clock, right?
Yep.
The defense would have had to be more creative. The offense has to be more creative. You play better basketball. Other kids get to shoot. Everyone wins. I have 75 minutes on YouTube at every level of play. We play with a shot clock on Saturdays in our youth leagues. We had a game the other night. It was like 88-70. 7th and 8th grade basketball because it's a 30-second shot clock.
It's called fun.
The shot clock is the best development tool that was ever created. It's better than the coach, right? It is the best development tool because it makes everyone shoot when they're open because there's 7 on the clock. So when you're able to shoot when you're open, you practice it all summer because you're going to actually do it. If you don't play with a shot clock, you shouldn't shoot because you should give it back to the best player because he could shoot. Coaches are better, coaches are more creative, and I'm a happier individual because I hate, no exaggeration, I say this to high school coaches all the time. It's not a knock on them. They're coaching the game that they have. I do not like watching New Jersey high school basketball ever, almost ever, because kids are dumb basketball players because they don't play with the shot clock. They don't know how to create shots. They don't play with any sense of urgency. They don't play with any sense of wisdom, because it really doesn't matter if we can't solve this puzzle. We'll just come back out and set another play. So we will do an entire episode on the shot clock. We need to. But my point in the shot clock in college basketball is we act as if, I can't imagine it being 24 seconds. But nobody could imagine it being 35 20 years ago. And now it's 30. Let's just give up here.
I mean, it was 45 and that was a big deal. 45 seconds.
Big deal to change it to 35. Oh, well, I don't know if we can create shots. And this is the big thing.
If you can't, oh my God.
When I run a little kids clinic, all right, and I put 15 seconds on the shot clock for 5th and 6th graders, guess what? They find shots.
Yep.
Right.
Figured out.
You adjust to the constraints that you're giving them. And this is essentially the principle we're talking about, is the constraints are your guide. So if you choose the wrong constraints, and this is true for coaching, this is true for budgeting, this is true for anything. You want to be as clear as possible about the constraints you're creating. And what we're doing today in college basketball is we're focusing on the people who are operating within the constraints, never asking ourselves, maybe the constraints aren't good enough. Yeah. Maybe we need to adjust the constraints of quarters and shot clock and TV timeouts, right? And that's the one thing that when I mention the shot clock, people are like, oh no. And I'm like, you have no idea. You've never experienced basketball with the shot clock.
Well, and then the worst thing is
a negative thing. It'll actually be a positive thing, even for you as a coach.
But that's the thing is a lot of the responses you get from coaches are like, oh, you have no idea how hard it is to create a good shot. Like, it's ridiculous against these defenses. And I would argue that it should get easier. It should get easier because you'll never allow that defense to set.
It was
you with a 30-second shot clock, you walk it up, set defense, and you wonder why you can't get a shot. Like,
it was easy. Think about this. I think it was easier back in 1990 or whatever to play that way, especially if you wanted to. But the games often had more flow. All right. Yep. The shooting wasn't as good. The shot clock was at 45 seconds, but there were 2 TV timeouts a half.
Yeah.
So you had more scoring and you had a 45-second shot clock. You had the wrong constraint in that. But because you changed the amount of timeouts that there were. All right. And this is true in the professional game. They play with a 24-second shot clock. I don't remember what the rules were when I was there, but our timeout ability was very limited. Right. And let's get into this. The coach called it at the table, meaning like the coach couldn't call a timeout in live play. The players,
flow. You can't stop. Yeah.
In certain countries, at least, but maybe in all, I couldn't call a timeout. I couldn't just go to the ref and go timeout. That you had to wait for the dead ball for the. And this is definitely my last year in Ukraine. They did this, but I'm pretty sure it was consistent that the coach had to look at the table and go, I want a timeout. Well, what ends up happening, even when you call timeouts that way, number one, it puts more pressure on the actual game itself. You can't just win the game at the end, right? With a bunch of timeout and set play calls. You can't get your kids out of trouble.
You got to manage the game, but you got to manage the game, which is a lot of levels.
But even in a high school game last night, the kid rolls over, he travels, there's a jump ball situation, and the coach yells timeout, and the guy gives him timeout. That doesn't happen, right? But also what happens is the coach can take it back. So I was the kind of player who was going to launch.
Oh, yeah. True.
So I was the kind of player who's like, things are going wrong. Give me the ball. I'm launching a 3. Everyone shut up. I love that time stuff, right? So things are going bad and I'm falling asleep and all right, we're down 4. And then I hit a 3. What's the coach do? Never mind. Don't want a timeout.
Pulls the timeout. Yep.
Pulls the timeout. So that actually contributes.
Timeout's almost like a sub in that sense. How many times you send a sub to the table? It's only in a dead ball that a sub can come in. You go 2 for 2 in the next couple possessions. They're not taking you out.
Oh, I do it once a game. We're subbing a guy. Right, he hits a shot, and I go. So go to this though. Is with the timeout situation, it's the same thing with what we say about with rhythm, because we're all about the rhythm and the flow of the game.
Yep.
What's the number one thing you do to disrupt the rhythm of the other
team?
Call
timeout.
You call timeout.
Or I played for Ben Howland. He used to call it after a made basket. We'd make 2 in a row. He'd call timeout. I'm like, what? Like,
yeah, we're rolling. That's because he liked defense so much.
He was he controlled the game that way, he was good.
So But the point being is we're sitting there saying we're going to add more, the one thing that disrupts rhythm, let's add more of them. And then let's complain that there's not more rhythm. And let's put it on the officials. It's not the officials' fault.
Joe,
And
but it's the same thing with freedom of movement, though. We did this with freedom of movement. We did this freedom of movement thing, and they said, we need to get scoring up in college basketball. So we're going to blow the whistle every time down floor. And the funny thing was they celebrated it. They said, look at scoring's up. It's up 1.5 points per game over the last year. And you're like, look at free throws. You're shooting more free throws.
You're scoring when the clock is stopped.
You didn't fix anything. You put some Coban over a cut, and you're going to take that Coban up, and the cut's still going to be there. Like, you've got to figure this out. Like, the rhythm and flow piece is big. The timeout piece, I like that European timeout piece. I think that's good. But let's get back to the quarters, because the quarters, let's just set what you're thinking.
Let's wait on the quarters for a second, because when you talk about reducing physicality, I think this is the most important point. When you see when a team goes no huddle, are the linemen as physical? No.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Is the defense as tight? No. They can't be. Being physical requires rest.
Yes.
Right? And this is like, okay,
people don't get that. Like, fatigue actually helps flow.
Fatigue absolutely helps flow.
Yes.
So if you make the game a free-flowing game by not having multiple timeouts, you will reduce physicality, right? The number one thing, when we played Michigan State at home, actually on the road too, remember, we had a nice lead.
We were up 11 at the half. We lost by 25. But
we lost by a straight 30. There was like a 40-point swing in the second half, and it was like a tidal wave.
Well, there was something though. Do you remember the locker room at halftime? And God bless Jerry Dunn. I don't want to take it. So we're getting all hyped up. We're all positive at this point. Like, we're all like, yeah, we'll do this. We're up 11 at the half at Michigan State. We took
might
a
have
couple
been yelling at each other about something. Who knows?
Yeah, but no. I think it was like pretty intense, but pretty positive. And we had to take. Remember, we took 2 puddle jumpers to get there because our like we couldn't get a plane in. There was snow, so we got a day of the game. And we're in the half. We're kind of getting on each other. Coach comes in. He's like, guys, settle down. He goes, we can win this game.
As if he was surprised.
And we're like, it was almost as if we already lost by 30 at that point.
You're like, we actually thought we could too, Coach. Now I'm not so sure. But, but at the same time, they came at us. But what happened in the first half is we would come out and create pace.
Yes.
Pace is what negates physicality. And I never wanted to play Michigan State in a half-court game. We beat them that way one time in the Big Ten tournament, where they probably
we also beat Wisconsin that year. Wisconsin, my freshman year, your junior year. Wisconsin, this is the year they went to the Final Four. They were giving up like 54 points a game. We beat them at home, but you had 30 plus, maybe 36 on Mike Kelly.
It was a free-flowing game.
We made it free-flowing. There was no way we were slowing it down.
So to reduce physicality, the number one thing you can do is just don't call timeout, right? So I value scoring. And again, we can score. It's not like we struggle to score when we have TV timeouts. We were fine in those games this year too. But you have to create pace and never give a break. Right. So that's the principle. When you press somebody, you're negating physicality by never giving them the break. Right. And there's built-in breaks in the game of basketball. When we talk about the Big Ten, because we're Big Ten probably centric, even though I probably would have liked the ACC better because of physicality. When you look at the game, when you give a team 10 seconds to rest on defense, and then you give them 2.5 minutes in a timeout, and you do that consistently, the game is going to become a war, right? Yeah. The game's going to become more physical. If you press them immediately, which, by the way, Michigan did a little bit last night to Purdue, loved it, and then they stopped doing it.
They stopped doing it, yep.
Well, and maybe they couldn't sustain it. I don't know their bench situation, but at the same time, you got TV timeouts. You're probably okay. Yeah. But when you don't allow a team to set up that way, you're negating their physicality. That's the number one way to negate the physicality of a team is pace. And timeouts are a disruptor to pace. Therefore, the game's going to get more physical the more stoppages you have. And I argue with the rules in that regard, but I also say to coaches, like, timeouts are not. If you want to if you're the less physical team, the most important thing for you to do is to never give them a break. And there's a variety of ways to do that. But the rules make it harder when you got 4 guaranteed, 6 probably. Then you got even, by the way, timeouts. I don't like timeouts. I want to end my game.
I got to get you off of
with
timeouts.
6. All right, sorry. I want to end my game with all 6 tomorrow. But
right.
But here's the thing: is now you have a use it or lose it. You don't even.
I know.
You got 2 timeouts in the last half of the first half that the coach doesn't even need. He calls a timeout to call the play that he just called from the sidelines. What? Who cares if you lose it? Lose it.
I wonder if I could get.
Anyway. All right,
I wonder.
So I got to get off.
I want to figure out. I got to figure out if I can get the. I got to figure out if I can get like little GIFs in, or I can plug a GIF, GIF or whatever they call them, of like you beating the dead horse, which is it's your timeout dead horse right now. All right, so let's go. Look, because it's all tied together. That's the thing. Like what we're talking about is all tied together. So I do want to actually. You called 2 timeouts in a row your last game, so I don't even want to hear it because your guys were.
Those are the only 2 I called all game, though. There you go.
Okay, all right. So anyway, but so and you needed to kill whatever flow was happening there at the moment, but you ended up winning by 20, so it's fine. But the other part of this is, and because these things are all connected, right? So quarter system. The way I see it is 4 quarters, 10-minute quarters. That's fine. 1 break at the 5-minute mark. I don't care how long that break. 2 minutes. I don't know what it needs to be. 2 minutes is fine, and then do a 3-minute break. 3-minute break at the quarters. So you have a 2-minute timeout in between, which means 5 minutes of gameplay, 5 minutes of flow. Add that whole you can't call a timeout on the floor. You got to call it I love that. Don't stop the game. Keep the game rolling. So 5 minutes of flow, good timeout. 5 more minutes of flow, nice 3-minute break where you can really regroup. Because to me, at the end of that first quarter, great opportunity to sit back, say 30,000 feet. What's going on? What's this game doing? How do we need to adjust? Are there specific things we need to adjust to, or what's the flow of this game? How can we disrupt it? Like. That to me is the ideal situation where you can create multiple pockets of flow, but also you can keep your freaking audience. I think that's a big part right now. The game's not as fun. Where when I'm watching a game, when I'm calling a game and someone calls timeout with 12:45 left, I'm sitting there going, you've got to be kidding me. Because in 45 seconds, we're going to have another timeout.
Yep.
Why would I stay and watch? I'm going to turn something else on. I got a Hallmark Christmas movie on by this point. Like seriously. I love basketball.
I am more. This is the thing we say, right? I am more inclined to stick with the soccer game than I am a basketball game. Than I am to stick with the college basketball. As crazy as that sounds, I know European soccer. It's a 0-0 finish, and I watch the whole thing. Yes, because there's no timeouts. It's just on. You're hanging out. At any time there could be this great play and great chance. And I stick with a soccer game more than I would a basketball game, probably even
college basketball game.
Yeah, because you flip around. I got the last button. I got like 8 channels on the last button, man. I got all sorts of things back there. I got DVRs. The kids want to watch them. So you lose my interest with all the breaks, and I might never come back. If the game's not interesting, I might never come back, and you're losing it because of that. Now, the other interesting thing though about the quarter system, and this is the biggest thing I say to officials and anybody, is it enables the referees to reset every quarter.
Yes.
And yes. I don't know why we're not talking about this, but there is so much pressure in a 2-half game on the officials to get every call right for 2 reasons. All right. One is if you mess up 6 minutes at the beginning of the second half and a team 6-1, however legitimate it might seem, 2 of those calls, you might have missed 2 one way and messed up 2 the other way. That's all it is. That's all you have to do to have a 5 or 6-1 differential. You've literally just dug a hole for that team with 1 foul. And now you think you got to even it out. In a half system, it's really hard to do without going. I yell, I do. And if I get frustrated, we always have some new officials and they struggle with this. And I try to say to them, you just went on a run. They didn't go on a run. You went on a run. You just went on a 5-1 run because you thought you had to even this out, even if the game wasn't equal. Maybe it was 5-3. It wasn't 5-1, but you went on this run. And then you think it's a coincidence that now the game's closer than it should be. It's not a coincidence, right? So the quarter system enables the referees to reset the fouls. It also punishes fouling in greater measure, right?
Excuse me.
So instead of the 1-on-1, you're automatically in the double at the 5th foul each quarter. I think that punishes fouling more. And if you want to reduce physicality, punish fouling more.
Punish fouling.
Right?
Yep.
Punish it.
Yep.
You're the kid's more inclined to make 2 out of 2 when he's got 2 than he is the 1-on-1. I personally like the idea of the 1-on-1. It makes the game interesting at the end, et cetera, stay out of the bonus. But if you want to reduce physicality, increase scoring, punish fouling, right?
Yeah.
The other, I'll probably write this in. I think I still have time when they send me for my suggestions. I say these things every year, is there's a ton of pressure that if you mess up one foul call on the best player on one team, you've just made them lose.
Yeah.
Because of the 5 foul system.
Yep.
If you allow 1 or 2 players, and this is, I don't know why we can't do this. We act like it's an impossibility. People say 6 fouls or 5 fouls. Why does it have to be that? Why can't we do 1 or 2 guys end with 6 fouls? The coach's discretion. So last year when Gonzaga's in the tournament and they called 2 bad, they called 2. If they were bad, they were I didn't like them. On Chet Holmgren, and Gonzaga loses the game. I don't think Gonzaga loses the game with Chet Holmgren in the game.
Especially if he can be aggressive and be normal.
If he can be aggressive and a rim protector. He was very effective in that game. And I remember saying to you about that game, if they allowed him to foul out at 6, Gonzaga wins the game. But instead, the officials, again, not their fault, right? It's a bang-bang play. They make the wrong call, and that wrong call impacts the game in greater measure, right? So the NBA doesn't want that. So everyone gets 6, but they also play 48-minute games. If you give everyone 6, you're not punishing fouling enough. If you give 1 or 2, that's fine, right? And I might have missed out on the NCAA tournament one year, my first year coaching, because my best player got 2 horrible foul calls on him by an old official who shouldn't have been in the game, literally didn't belong in the game. And I had to sit him. We were plus 19 with my best player on the floor. We lost by 6. Right? We were going to win the game if he was on the floor. Yeah. And they called 2 horrible fouls that were fouls, on video and everything else, and it decides the game. So in that respect, it's the foul system, both in the quarter reset and in maybe that consideration. But you got to punish fouling more without being too disruptive. So, the quarter system overseas, they do this without the TV timeouts, but in some of the higher leagues, they have the TV timeouts. Yep. It's 1, I believe. It's fine. There's a 24-second shot clock. There's great flow. There's less timeouts per team, right? And per available for the game. And maybe I don't even know if they do replay, and maybe that's why riots break out afterwards.
But do you know there's an indirect element to this? Like the indirect benefit to this is also better pros. Like if shot clocks are present in high school, and even AAU, even though AAU probably doesn't matter, everybody just wants to go ball. But if shot clocks are present in high school and
AAU, it has
middle school, but just think about the development of a young middle school kid who can play, who's learning how to play with a shot clock, make decisions quicker, think through the game, feel the game differently. We have better pros in this country. We'll have skilled pros. We'll have guys in the college level who have a good feel for the game. They have no feel for the game because by the time they get to college, you're like, wait, it's shot clock. Like we got to execute quickly and still kind of operate the same way. It's a challenge, and I think it's limiting the game in so many ways. But let's lighten it up a little bit because I think we can go on for hours on this stuff. I know you can. I'll give you my fun rule because in addition to these changes we talk about that I think do make the game better, I don't think it's wrong to consider certain rules that make the game fun. Like overseas, that international rule of a live ball off the rim is something that would be awesome here. Like we're talking, we say stupid things like, well, maybe we should come out with a 4-point shot. And you're like, okay, like how do you have records with a 4-point shot? What are we doing here, guys? And maybe there's an argument there because, well, we had a 3-point shot when there was no 3-point shot. So, but I think the live ball, experimental, live ball off the rim, I've seen it play out in the international leagues and it's fun. And when you consider the athletes that we have at this level, college level, even high school and pro level, that ball bouncing on the rim that could be taken off by a defender or flushed home by an offensive player, in addition to some of the changes we're talking about with better rhythm, better flow, less physicality, more plays at the rim, I think that would be a fun one. But you have to have that with a wider lane and an extended restricted arc, because the block charge, which is going to be a whole episode, let's not even touch it. Let's not even go down the block charge way. But like, do you have any other fun rules? Like you had mentioned the timeouts at a dead ball. It's got to be a dead ball timeout. Do you have any other that you think would just make the game more fun? Because I think it's necessary right now.
I think you mentioned this with the wider lane. I think there should be 2 courts in the world. I think there should be a FIBA court and a NBA court. And they're almost the same. It's the shorter 3-point line for FIBA by a couple feet. If you wanted to do kind of where the high school line is for youth, that's not all bad. But what they do in FIBA is just they don't count threes. So kids are incentivized to shoot within the arc and develop their form better, et cetera. They also play man-to-man. They do some different things. I just think there should be 2 courts in the world. Simplify this whole thing. We got like 8 lines on some court. Like, give me a break. There's 2. Girls can shoot from there. My 12-year-old can shoot from the FIBA line. Give me a break, right? Yeah. This is not that hard. And if you can't, if it's a lower level, just don't count threes. That's fine too. Incentivize kids to move closer and gain better, whatever. So I agree with that. And I like so the one thing to specify though about that goaltending is that doesn't mean there's no goaltending.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Goaltending is like, if it's coming, if it's once it hits the rim.
This isn't backyard jam ball,
Yeah, and I do agree with it. It never bothered me at all. The only time it bothered me is when my shot was going to go in and one of my teammates comes out of nowhere and puts it in. I'm like, yo, dude, those are my points, man. Yeah. Those are my points. Are you kidding me? Like that was going in, Buster. And then we laugh about it. Like, yo, I got that. I'm like, yeah.
You got bonus money tied to points too.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have any of that. But no, I agree with that. And I don't, just in terms of like fun though, I value fun. Like, I think the game should be more fun. I think I should have a hard time changing the channel. Yes. And right now in college basketball, I don't have a hard time changing the channel. It's just, I'll wait till the end of the game. That's going to be close. This guy hits a shot and they didn't, and he hits another shot. They didn't.
Michigan State last night. Michigan State, Iowa. Michigan State made 3 straight shots, and that was it. That was a game.
Yeah, it was a good ending. Was it a good game? No, I didn't find it to be a good game. I found it to be a good ending. It was an entertaining ending, but the game should be more fun. And I think, to me, the game of basketball, we agree on this. It's all about rhythm, it's flow, it's feel, it's spontaneity, it's creativity. Yeah. So that's where the jazz comes in of basketball.
Yep.
And what we should, and this is true, and I don't know why we don't accept this, but like every rule change that's ever been made in basketball has been in favor of offense. It's never been in favor of defense. The future is always offense. It always is offense. So if you can stay on the cutting edge,
because the future, to have a future, it's got to be entertaining. Bottom line.
Well, and
for people to be interested to play it or to watch it, it's got to be entertaining.
Yeah, and even more so today, where there's such a competition for eyes, right?
Yeah,
is the game needs to be better because there's more competition, right? There's 700 channels. There's 70-inch screen TVs at home. That's true even of live play. If I want someone to come pay money to watch our team, we better be darn well worth it.
Better make it an event.
Yeah, make it fun. Make it something you can only get in person. Make it something you can only get there. So I think those kind of rule changes, that's what it's ultimately about, making the game more fun, more entertaining. I get on my high horse about this stuff, but that really is my motivation. And we'll do a whole episode on the shot clock because you just mentioned making better players better. The shot clock makes everyone better. So we'll get on that, but I think that's enough for today.
Yeah. So where do you think, I think we should, maybe take a step back, lighten things up, maybe get more basketball related next. I was thinking identity. It's one of those things, we talk culture a lot and no one really knows what it actually means, but we say it. They have great culture. I think identity is the biggest piece that is hard to achieve, especially given the fact that it's hard to have time. We always say time is influence, and time and influence is what's required to establish an identity. That was where I was thinking, just that conversation next, because it's something you're doing at Rowan, and ideally you'll do at a higher level someday. Do you have anything else in mind next?
Nope.
All right.
Well, I think we leave that open-ended. I think we can get into some current events too, like we talked about, as we used to do on radio. Just start off with a little 10-minute commentary and then move into something else. We'll find our rhythm.
Yeah, we also talked about doing like a little mini PTI where people start to give us some topics and we can discuss the topics. I mean, there's so many things. Like one of the ones I wanted to get into was honestly, nobody wants to talk about it. It's Chris Beard and that situation in Texas. Nobody in my profession really wants to talk about it because it's a slippery slope. So those aren't long-ended conversations because there's so much we don't know. But I think there's a way to talk about things with truth and honesty that does still serve the game. So maybe it's identity. Maybe we'll actually tweet out a preview of what we do next. I don't know.
There's an idea.
We're still new at this. Yeah, we'll get to it. But no, this has been good. Episode 2. Joe, you talked about 80% of the time, which is a record for me. So
it's hard to
we'll
find.
see if I can take over a little bit more next time. I hope everybody enjoys it. And we do appreciate it if anybody tunes in. Leave comments. I guess subscribe. That's another big thing. Let us know if there are things that you want us to talk about. We're happy to have the conversation and welcome you into the conversation. It's Coach and the Commentator with Crispin Brothers.